It's 30th of August 2018, 4 p.m. in Europe, 9 a.m. in Colombia. We welcome you all to the webinar on Colombia's PV market. Quite fittingly named On Your Mark, Get Set, Go. The webinar is in the build-up towards a conference we are organizing, El Futuro Solar Colombia. Today we have two speakers presenting on the Colombian PV market to give you all the ins and outs on this new hot emerging market. After a short introduction, I will also introduce the two speakers, and then we will dive into some of the topics. Of course, with the new administration of Duque come in, there's a new government in place, new policies lined up, and of course everybody's been made aware of the headlines Colombia has been making on the auction program that has been announced for the early start of 2019. John Padilla will start off with this presentation, diving into the governmental changes and the policies that will shape Colombia's renewable energy future. He will also provide a brief outlook of the planned auction program as it is at the moment, as with all the knowledge that's out there at the moment. The final framework has not yet been announced, but hopefully with the event El Futuro Solar Colombia planned for November 19 till 21, we have all the details out by then. After John Padilla, we will switch to Marc Tremel. He will discuss the emerging of Colombia's PV market, which was mainly driven by the distributed generation regulation. In this sense, DG has been a trailblazer for the PV market. He will also discuss key challenges and opportunities in the PV market. As a known expert in the local market, he has ample insights to offer to us as the audience. As discussed, it is in the build-up to El Futuro Solar Colombia. The event is aimed towards providing you a platform to kick off your presence in Colombia, be it as a project developer, investor, or supplier in this really hot new emerging market. The event will connect you with the local international PV industry, either active or scoping the market. You get a chance to network with key stakeholders. For this reason, we host an exclusive interactive meeting on the 19th of November. It's a workshop, closed door, with key regulators, government officials, and local banks. The 20th and 21st of November, we have then the B2B conference where you can connect with the private sector active in Colombia's solar energy market. Of course, there's enough or plenty of networking opportunities. We facilitate one-on-one meetings, etc., so you can get connected to the right place in this market. A little bit about us, Solarplaza, a founder-led company based in the Netherlands, established in 2004. We've been all across the globe, always digging into new markets and new topics for the solar industry. We try to empower the industry to be better, be more successful in these markets. For this reason, we've been to Colombia twice before on a so-called PV trade mission in 2014 and 2015. To give early ground and early connections to market entrants on that time. On the webinar itself, if you have any technical issues, please use the chat box. It's part of the webinar tool. If you also have any questions for the speakers, feel free to also use the chat box for this reason, or the question module in the chat or in the webinar tool. At the end of the presentations, we will leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. Questions that we cannot address during the Q&A time, we will note down and we will see if we can dig into them with the speakers or with the relevant experts to offer this maybe in a follow-up article or close to the event in a follow-up webinar. Of course, the presentation slides will be made available. Recordings as well. You will get an automatic notification when we have them. Normally, it takes about 2 working days to have them online and ready to be sent out. As discussed, we have 2 speakers. The first one, John Padilla, he's partner and managing director of IPD Latin America. He has been with us for plenty of events. He offers, as an independent energy consultancy firm, they offer risk insights, assessments, and strategic consultancy services on the energy market. They have a focus on Latin America with 4 key markets being Colombia, Mexico, Peru, and Venezuela. And of his own experience from Wall Street time, is in structuring of energy and infrastructure deals. I will give the floor now to John Padilla to start off his presentation as well. We will set up his presentation slides. John, you're in. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Rick. Good
Hi,
morning.
John. Good morning to you. As you can see on the screen is your presentation. I would say take to the bridge, John.
Okay, fantastic. Well, pleasure to speak to all of you this morning across the globe. Interesting times in Colombia following the elections that we recently had. And yeah, I think the topic and reason why I think everybody's here is with respect to the upcoming auction. And I think there was a question that had been lingering over the last few years as to when would Colombia move forward with its world-class renewables. So it's been a very long path, and there's still a lot of work to do, but I'll try to dig into a few highlights at least here with the time that I've got allocated. So IPD as a energy consultancy, so we're 20 years as a company. We've been in Colombia for 10 years. Opened up our offices there back in 2009. We, as Rick had mentioned, we cover the region from several bases. And we have a number of strategic kind of consulting practices. We do quite a bit of strategic work in lobbying, as well as traditional studies, things that we've done there in Colombia on the renewable side now for some time. Syndicated research as well as financial support. So in terms of due diligence on partners, we've done quite a bit of that kind of work. I'm based actually in Bogota, and then basically split my time between Mexico and Bogota. So enough about us. I actually wanted to start out the presentation and actually focus on governability, because this is really driving decisions that are being made and that will be made under this administration. The elections, as probably most people on the call are aware, was a lot closer than anybody anticipated. And for the first time, the left, which you see there in red, highlighted in red, matters. So over a decade ago, and previous to that, when we were traveling with regular frequency down to Colombia, people said the political left would never really amount to much. That's changed dramatically. And a lot of this was driven off of the peace process, also driven off of the issue of anti-corruption. So there was actually an anti-corruption referendum that took place over the weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then the other main issue here is on corruption is this concept of, in the past, you had political parties that all kind of coalesced together, and you had coalitions that were formed. This administration has taken the decision that they are going to attempt to not undertake coalitions. And what that means is still, the jury's still out. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner here that the coalition between the Cambio Radical and Centro Democrático is much smaller. This is just in Senate. The same very much applies in Congress. And so this will have a big impact in terms of renewables, in terms of vested interests, and how the decisions are made as it relates to the auction, etc. If we go to the next slide here, I think I clicked it. Let's just make sure. There we go. So this was the elections here in the middle, and what you see is that unprecedentedly, Petro, the opposition candidate, garnered 8 million votes, and that caught, I think, people across the board by a very significant surprise. Duque's priorities are very much focused on finances. Anyone that's followed Colombia has seen that it has been engaging in deficit spending, and its debt has continued to rise. So there's a lot of talk as to how it is that you're going to generate the kind of cash flow that is necessary. Oil revenues had certainly played that role for some time. As oil prices dropped, that had a massive impact. I think the big question for a country like Colombia, which is nearly 50 million people, is how is it going to diversify? So I think renewables fits into that picture, and it has been a priority for the Duque administration. Interestingly enough, and why we circled it here, was the campaign promises of Petro was to move Colombia to Switzerland, or basically a 100% renewable market. I say that somewhat in jest, but the point is that it was kind of leapfrogging probably three generations forward from where Colombia is today. Nonetheless, the point is that there is consistency, there is agreement in the desire to focus on renewables. The question is what does that actually mean? And I think that's really the starting point in what we want to focus on. So what we've done here is this is just kind of a bit of a teaser in terms of some of the key individuals that are looking to play roles in the energy sector, and specifically with respect to renewables. Duque is 42 years old. He's the youngest president that's come in to power in modern times, and he made a campaign promise to have a very equally weighted female and male administration, one that is young. And so a lot of these individuals that you see here are very much kind of fit into that mold. The other thing that I would point out is that the individuals that we have highlighted down below are still not confirmed. This is just based off of our intelligence and the kind of things that we do on a regular basis. And we'll see how that kind of shapes up. The other thing that we wanted to kind of point out here is that under the Santos administration, there had been incredible amounts of political appointments with respect to the energy sector and development. Even though we may be speaking about oil and gas and mining, it's relevant for any type of infrastructure development, is that there was a lot of kowtowing that took place. And it was because you had a lot of political appointments. So what we've been focused on and what we've been working with clients on is identifying kind of who are the more technical people that are getting involved, and if that is going to be the shift that Duque decides to take. That will be very telling as to where the renewable sector may be moving from a large picture perspective. Okay. Then what we wanted to do is we just wanted to kind of take a look at the overall regulatory development. So anybody that has kind of followed this closely over the last few years, certainly since Solarplaza came down to Colombia on its first trade mission, we've seen just a very kind of slow creeping movement here. I mean, if you actually extended this timeline backwards, I mean, you saw that you had essentially IPPs. Well, you had the market started opening up basically 2001, but the real meaningful items are here starting in 2014. Here in 2018 with Resolution 30, what you saw was the ability for small self-generation to sell back to the grid. That's something that is a item, particularly with the auction, because it's not contemplated at present. And so the question is what is the current administration going to do in terms of trying to make both the auction as well as the regulatory framework more robust? This is what was put together. And so, again, for those that follow this closely, we saw that in the last week of the Santos administration here last month, they basically executed these resolutions with respect to the auction. I think the big takeaways are with respect to the length of the PPAs. So in the kind of over guiding framework, you saw that you have the ability to do 10, 15, or 20 years. However, with respect to the auction itself, what they chose to do is only do 10-year PPAs and do bids in Colombian pesos only. They're not indexed as currently contemplated, and so this makes this much more kind of like the Brazilian market rather than some of the other more successful markets that we've seen certainly throughout the region. And so that raises a number of very significant questions as to what are they looking to achieve? Will they be looking to only attract local players, or are they actually looking to attract a much more kind of international group of individuals? And so that's where we kind of say, you know, is the current government, given the vested interest, given the governability issues, are they interested and are they willing to kind of take a second look at this, or are they just going to move forward with what has been put on the table here over the last month and move forward on that basis? And that will have big implications, because the reality is that Colombia has tremendous capacity, and given the fact that hydro continues to represent 70% of the mix, more or less, and the fact that Colombia continues to cycle through El Nino, and every subsequent Nino that we've had has been more severe. Renewables truly offers a kind of counterweight to that that dynamic. So the ability to actually, when it's dry, to rely more on solar. When you take a look at wind, it's very much some of the same dynamics. It can be very complementary. Typically, what we see around the globe is that utilities are reluctant. It's a pain for them to kind of convert their grids and deal with the intermittent supply that you know, solar and other renewables add to that mix. So if you take a look at the example of California, I mean, I think they've had their challenges and they've had their growing pains, but I think that's part of the transition of what it is that comes with renewables. But the reality is that the world-class prices that have been generated in those markets where you have good access to capital, and Colombia has that ability, can be incredibly attractive. So again, the question is do you want a small amount of generation coming from renewables just to see how this is going to work, or do you want to actually kind of you know, take advantage of the examples that we've seen throughout the region and move forward with it? The commitment is there. You can see the quotes that have been made, and they said that Minister Suarez has come out and she has said that they're committed to the auction process. This is, I would say, much more kind of a moral commitment. So there's always chances for delays, but the fact that that she's verbally come out and said that is meaningful. And we'll see exactly where that kind of emerges as we go forward here. So to wrap up, what we wanted to kind of take a look at is, as you can see in the background there, that's a map of the northern part of Colombia. On the upper far right-hand side, you see La Guajira, which has some very attractive irradiation levels, and then we've also highlighted some of the more commercial markets, including Cartagena and Barranquilla, where there's actually lots of interest, particularly given that the backup supply is diesel, not very price competitive, and the reliability of power in the Caribbean in particular has been incredibly problematic. And you can read about that. There's plenty of information as to what's kind of gone on over there. And then what we contrasted that with is what you saw in terms of where Petro won and where Duque won. The important thing is up here in the upper right-hand corner, which is that the vote differential was less than 1%. And so what this entails is that in terms of local development, this is going to be imperative that that companies that are looking to participate in the auction or in other infrastructure development, that they are spending the appropriate time engaging in the social license to operate. The environment in Colombia over the last 8 years under Santos has certainly become quite anti-infrastructure development, and that is going to take quite a bit of work to overturn. So I think renewables comes with a fresh and clean start, no pun intended, and the point is that that works to your advantage. However, given some of the examples that we've seen in places like Mexico and elsewhere, if you're not careful, you can get yourself into a lot of hot water very quickly. So some of the non-technical risks that we tend to focus on, that we support companies with, and things that we see are going to be fundamental to your development efforts, is going to be the engagement with utilities, certainly on the auction level, but more importantly down here is lobbying and education. There's still a tremendous amount of education that needs to be done across the board at all levels, whether we're talking about governments, associations, populations, etc. And then you have to understand that there's, like there is in a lot of places, but the vested interests tend to be very powerful and very strong in Colombia. And with the non-interconnected grids, that will be, it's a no-brainer that that solar will work very, very well in a lot of those places where they're using diesel on a non-24/7 basis. Some of this fits into the whole post-conflict process, but there's going to be just a lot of work that needs to be done. Security continues to be an issue, as anybody that's followed things in the country, and it's just bifurcating is what's happening as the kind of traditional entities are either eroded or disappear. The auction itself, there's a lot of work to be done there. And then the thing that we've seen certainly over the last decade is that licensing, permitting has taken up a tremendous amount of time and effort. This is where we're hoping and we expect to see more technical people involved in the regulators and within the ministry. That will be a telltale sign of good things to come. But there's still, I think the bottom line here is that there's a lot of work to be done. And we'll see what evolves here. We're 3 weeks into the new administration. It's all very very new, and the question will become, as some of these people are named, as policy starts to get directed, where we're heading from there. So with that, I'll leave I'll turn the mic over back to Rik.
John, thank you for your presentation. I do have two questions. If you could maybe move closer to your mic also to answer them. You were with us in the PV trade mission in the past. If we would have asked you in 2014, at what point the renewable energy industry would be by 2018, are we above or under your expectations of 2014, John Padilla?
Oh, that's a half glass full, half glass empty kind of question.
I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah, so I'll answer both. I think that we're certainly given the massive success that we've seen globally in the region, the massive drop in prices, the compelling mechanisms of where we're at is befuddling that Colombia has taken as long as it has. But I guess for any historical kind of fanatic, I would say Colombia has always been, and particularly more of Bogota, the Altiplano, has always been a bit of an anomaly. So it's sometimes not surprising to see the kind of slow pace that's happened. I think the indicators are all for the same kind of reasons that we see the slowness of pace without government kind of leading the path is what I would say. A push from the government. Without the push from the government, the private sector will kind of be left to its own devices.
And okay, and then one final question before we move to a poll question and then on to Mark. Do you have any idea why the resolutions got executed only in the last hours of the previous administration? Was there a political reason behind it? Is it just getting things done before you hand over the power?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think there had been some commitments, and this was it fit very well into Santos's overall kind of political schematic. I think the big thing that it really is telling of is that Santos had been 500% focused on the peace process, and everything else was not even secondary; it was tertiary. And so this was kind of an easy win, so to speak. Everything was there; it just lacked the political will. And so I think it was kind of, one of those outgoing items that was, okay, what do we have that we can, that's easy to do, that is going to have broad support. And what you saw with the elections and the campaigns was that there was clear interest to move away from oil and gas. That's a whole separate discussion of whether the country is actually in a position financially in terms of government revenues to do so. But nonetheless, given the social dynamic, given the political dynamics that you have in the country, the ability to increase the footprint of oil and gas is incredibly limited. And so renewables becomes an easy win. And I would just say that that's what this really boiled down to.
Okay, thank you, John. I will briefly ask the audience for a poll question. We will be back with you after Mark's presentation for some extended Q&A. We got some questions coming in. I would also like to remind all the listeners to please send in your questions for either John or for Mark for the Q&A after the last presentations. For the audience at the moment, so we're looking at an auction scheme planned January 2019 of up to 1.5 gigawatts. I would like to ask you, as an expert or somebody looking into the market, what do you expect will be allocated towards solar energy? From the up to 1.5 gigawatts tender, what do you expect will be allocated to solar energy? Is it below 400 megawatts, between 400 and 800 megawatts, either 800 to 1200 megawatts, or all of it? Will all of it be taken up by solar energy with, let's say, aggressive bidding potentially coming in? We have some votes coming in. It is quite evenly shared up to now. So is it below 400 megawatts, 400 to 800 megawatts, 800 to 1200 megawatts, or all of the potential auction capacity allocated towards solar energy? We will close the polling right now, and then we will show the results on screen. So actually it's evenly divided, almost. The majority takes between 400 to 800 megawatts of a potentially up to 1.5 gigawatts auction scheme. That's positive. That's a positive note for Colombia, which has been quite well experienced with wind energy and also hydro, of course. So hopefully we can, as a PV industry, live up to the promise. I will now move towards the next presenter, Marc Tremel. He's the general manager of Colombinvest. If you've been to Colombia looking into solar energy, you must have run into this guy. He's one of the most experienced PV players in the market. He has ample experience from international PV markets, so he's an authority in the Colombia, based in Bogota since 2013 with Colombinvest. Marc, are you in?
Here we go. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Marc. Thanks for joining us. I've given you control of the presentations. The floor is yours. Please enlighten us all.
All right, perfect. So good morning to everybody. Thanks for having me at the webinar. It's a pleasure to join, and it's really a pleasure to hear the enlightening words of John. I could not agree much more on that. Very, very good words. So I'd like to first of all introduce myself a bit. I hope the one gonna work to change my slides. Yeah, here we go. So quick words about myself. I'm based in Bogota since 2013. German. I got to work for several manufacturers in the past. That one was too quick. Okay, here we go. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. Used to work for several manufacturers in the past, Suntec Power, IBC, Siemens, Satcon, and one of my activities besides Colombinvest, I'm active with the IPD University to teach part of the diploma for solar energy. That's been running just the second semester, so started this year. Yeah, I'm always delighted to be a speaker at events, share a little bit of knowledge over the last 13, almost 14 years in the industry, to see how we can move forward the market. Some very few words about Colombinvest. Well, we are a solar EPC company, moving towards IPP as well as the market develops. Our sweet spots are between 0.1 up to 1.5 megawatts. So everything what is in the DG market. So far we've realized about 25 projects. Won an excellent contractor from EEB, that is one of the utilities in Colombia, Empresa Energía Bogotá. And we do own some few projects under our own operation maintenance. A couple of customers that we've discussed, that we've done project with. So far, as you've seen, there are not too many megawatts built yet from our side, but we're working on that. One of the international customers that we got is Heineken. We should build by the end of next month. Once Heineken is really ready, to go forward because they are lacking with the civil works. Once this one is finished, we installed about 70 kilowatts there. That's the first start of their aggressive plans to really put solar on a high level. So I would like to talk today a little bit about the distributed generation market in Colombia, what I would call basically the residential and commercial industrial sector. Why are we focused much more on DG sector? Because actually so far it's been much easier to develop. It's been much easier to develop rooftop solar projects, let's say up to 100, 200, 300 kilowatt are pretty easy to install. At the end of the day, you compete against the whole energy price, which is not only generation, but the rest of the components. We'll see that later on. And the current market size that I would say we do have around 20 megawatts of distributed generation plants already built. We're going to see a couple of examples there as well. I guess there should be, in quotations and ideas, there should be around another 100 megawatts around. Nobody knows if this is going to happen soon, if this is going to happen now, if this is going to happen the next couple of years, but there's a good interest on the industry base. Only myself, we're talking about a couple of customers that has 40, 50, 60 plants in Colombia, industrial plants, because Colombia has a strong manufacturing sector, strong industrial sector. There's a lot of exports to neighboring countries like Ecuador, Peru, Panama. So there's a lot of industry in Colombia that certainly has energy needs. Major regions where we see is the development really strong. That's one is the center region where we are based, Región Andina. Certainly the coast is a really important sector to do because well, you have the air condition all year long. You have in Barranquilla a lot of industry, heavy industry, where a lot of megawatts are needed. And also the Pacific region, Cali and surroundings are certainly one of the sweet spots. Let me see, yeah, here we go. So talking about the real important regulation that's been in place, not for too much, only since March 2018. We've all been waiting for a remuneration scheme for excess energy. So the whole question was always if it's going to be a net metering, a net billing. Basically what we have with the CREC 030 since March 2018, we have a net billing where we only remove the commercialization part of the energy tariff. We get about 85 to 90% of the wholesale price. If you see below, you see the wholesale price, that's what we call the CEU, which is the part of the generation, transmission, distribution, the commercialization, losses, and restrictions. So basically, if you sell excess energy back to the grid and your system is below 100 kilowatts, you get everything, so generation, transmission, distribution, losses, and restriction. The only thing what you lose in is commercialization, which is about 30, 40 pesos of an energy price of 400, 450, 500 pesos. So it's pretty much you lose about 10%, which is still pretty good for systems below 100 kilowatts. What we actually do not agree with, but we have to live with that so far, is everything what is above 100K. Everything what is above 100 kilowatts and below 1 megawatt is still called self-generation at small scale, and then you only receive the generation price, which is pretty low in Colombia, because as John mentioned, typically we do have high amount of water. That's why your generation price is about 130, 150, 160 pesos. Which is about $50 per megawatt hour. And this really makes it very complicated to sell excess energy to the grid if you have a solar system of 105 kilowatts. You're better off installing 99 kilowatts than installing 105, 110, 200, 300 kilowatts. This really doesn't make too much of sense. And then above 1 megawatts, you got the same rules, but you got stricter measurements. You got to do an hourly measurement for a certain period of time. And this makes it very complicated. In addition to that, we got the CREG 015 pretty much published at the same time, where below 100 kilowatt, you have no obligation for any kind of backup contract. But above 100K, you have the obligation to sign a backup contract with the grid operator, with the utility, and that comes additionally to what we have if we don't receive a proper remuneration for excess energy. And additionally, you have to sign up a backup contract. A lot of projects are really complicated to do, let's say, financially. In addition to that, with the CREG 030, there are grid operator regulations coming into place, which are more severe than we ever thought, because well, the CREG 030 gave the operators about 3 months time, I think it was 2 months time to implement certain regulations internally. To receive that kind of excess energy, to really receive the payments, and so on. Basically, what they have been doing, they've been putting a lot of trouble to us. They say, for example, that now every single PV installation, pretty similar to what you have in the US, needs to have a visit from an inspector. It needs to fulfill the whole electrical code. Unfortunately, the whole electrical code, RETIE, is still at the version of 2013, and the only thing that is talking about is about the equipment, and the equipment shall just confirm the general compliance. There's no real necessity to fulfill local codes additionally. So that makes it very complicated. So you have a lot of inspectors running around where there's no clear message what they really need to inspect. Everybody knows how to inspect an AC system, but nobody knows how to inspect a DC system generated by solar energy. And then there are people coming up that you should install a common practice like in the US, which doesn't make sense to me. And if you export energy to the grid, so like selling energy on a net billing scheme, things can take up to a month and so on. You need to do hourly measurements and so on. So there's a lot of trouble being put into place, which really doesn't make things very easy to handle. If we look in general, who are the major players right now at the market, that we would see, basically it's the utilities themselves. It's Celsia, they're part of the Argos group. There's EPM, the local utility in Antioquia and other regions, the Santanderes in Colombia. There's Coenza, part of the Enel group, and then you got smaller utilities like Vatia and Cali and so on. And you got a couple of international EPC companies that got into the country since quite some time. So it's Panasonic, there's Renewable, and the other mid-sized companies. At the end of the day, if you see, let's say, real DG projects, you see, for example, you see the National Chocolate Company, a project built by Panasonic, so as far as I know, operated and invested by Celsia. So they signed a local PPA with those guys. It's Tecnoglass in Barranquilla, close to Barranquilla, about a bit more than 4 megawatts, built since about a year. There you see further project from Celsia. You see the Convention Center in Cartagena. You see the International Center for Agriculture in Palmira, close to Cali. And you see, for example, Italo, that's a project. Italo is doing chocolate as well in Bogota. So there's a DG project from Coenza, and you see various supermarkets coming also to the idea to install solar, basically by their company, owned by themselves. So Exito is part of the Casino Group, a French group, and they do own Green Yellow. That's a French EPC and a French developer. So basically, they install them internally. So coming to the end of my presentation, one, we got the challenge in the market. Certainly, one of the major challenges that you can see reflected in the auction scheme as well, that so far energy contracting is on a very short base. If you look at industrial customers right now in Colombia, every single industrial customer above 55,000 kilowatt hours a month, which is pretty much nothing, or 100 kilowatt of own consumption. They can sign long-term contracts with the utilities, actually all over Colombia. So you can have, at the coast, you can have Electricaribe, that's a grid operator, a utility for the whole coastal area. But you can have industrial customers that buy their energy from Emgesa, that's part of the Enel group in Bogota. That is not a problem at all. The problem itself is that most of these companies, they buy energy for 1 year, maybe 2 years, maximum 3 years. There are random examples that you can get an energy contract for more than 5 years. And this is one of the particular problems of Colombia, that we need to have long-term contracting. We don't have long-term contracting yet. And that's why if you get to an industrial customer and you ask them for a private PPA for 15 years or 20 years, they will automatically say, no, why should I do that? Explain them all the benefits and so on. But still, let's say it's not very common to find customers to get PPAs longer than 10 years. We are currently on a contractual phase with an industrial customer for 530, 550 kilowatts, and it's exactly the same thing. It's going to be a contract for 10 years, and then we will see how it develops, whether we're going to remove the panels or we're going to allocate them new, or we just renegotiate. That's the way how business has been done in Colombia. Well, it could be easier, but let's say that's a certain key challenge. On the other hand, you got restricted local knowledge about solar, especially on the authority side. So if you ask for an environmental permit, basically they don't know what you need, they don't know what is a solar panel. And for example, we had a recent customer here in Colombia where the authority took about 6 months to make a site visit to really see how 115 panels are looking like, and then to give a technical study to say, yes, solar panels are not harmful for the environment. The other topic that really bothers us a lot in the market are the grid operators and authorities. UPME, ANLA. UPME is the dependency of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, where you basically do major topics about the law 1715 with tax benefits. So they give you the technical approval, and then at the end of the day, you get ANLA, that is the environmental study, environmental authority, and they are most of the time too far away from understanding what is a solar panel and how that one really works. So basically it's too much of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, and at the end of the day, your costs are suffering a lot. There's no clear rules about technical standards. There's no real ready standard yet about solar, and the grid connection studies for both for DG and for utility scale just take too much time. But for sure, I'm always the optimist. I think there's a lot of good opportunities in the market. There's certainly good space for well-positioned international players, EPCs, IPPs. I think when it comes to finance, there's a lot of things we can improve on the local market. A lot of possibilities to get good finance started. I think there's also a very, very good market space for distribution companies, so wholesaler of equipment. Another thing which is very important, I think we just have to focus right now, if we talk about DG, we have to focus about plans up to 100K. They're interesting business models, interesting PPA models. The industry is also waking up. So there can be certainly private PPAs of 3, 5, 8 or 10 megawatts being signed. It's a lot of administration, but it's very interesting, let's say, to move ahead. And for sure, one of the key opportunities is that now that we got the new government, I think it can be very helpful to push things forward. So that one from my side. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to help. Really, always very, very. My idea is always, let's say, to spread the word about solar in Colombia. Really much looking forward to have you in Colombia in November.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Marc. I think it's not about spreading the word; it's about spreading the gospel. What you're doing here, you're preaching. No, it's really interesting to hear your view on it. I think we loop back into that the glass is half full, half empty. Also, when it comes to DG, might be the reality of the market. I do have one question, maybe to kick it off, the Q&A. In a minute, we also loop in John Padilla again. Did you have to become a mathematics teacher to understand the whole backup contract system? Is it that complicated, or is it not transparent? Could you maybe explain a bit about it?
Well, basically, what you have to understand that the CREC, the regulator, they are very, let's say, they're very mathematic, certainly. So far, if somebody asks me what is the exact amount of pesos that I have to pay for every kilowatt hour for the backup contract, my answer would be, I don't know. I'm an engineer, but still it is very, very complicated. So the best thing to do is, well, ask the utility how much is going to be the charge for the backup contract, because it's really not easy to understand. There's a lot of formulas involved in the CREC 015, and yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it also depends very much on the project as well, no? on the grid voltage level, on the losses that you locally have, on the injection voltage and stuff like that. So every single project certainly will have some particular remuneration scheme for the utility when it comes to the backup contract.
Okay, that makes sense. And then on the energy contracting, the experiences within Colombia, you mentioned like not many people, or there is not an experience with long-term agreements or contracts. Do other generators have above 10-year contracts to sell the energy?
From what I know, no. Maybe John can also help us a little bit on that. But from what I know, well, long-term contracting is 5 years, maybe.
Yeah. The only long-term contracts, I mean, you had back in the 1990s, and I actually financed, some of these projects. You had the IPPs, and some of those were definitely long-term contracts. The issue that you have is that it's interesting to kind of put this thing in historical perspective, but those gas-fired power plants were supposed to essentially provide the backup that was to protect the grid when El Nino came. And as we saw during the last El Nino, there wasn't availability of natural gas. The price was very high, and it created a tremendous amount of outcry. Ultimately, the Minister of Mines and Energy stepped down. I think memories tend to be very short. This is a reoccurring problem that we have in Colombia, and trying to get the backup supply and diversification. I think diversification is a key word that is going to be really important as we go forward.
Yeah, well, on this note, the diversification need, we also got a question coming in. The introduction is about 70% of generation comes from hydro, so reaching 100% renewable is not that hard. But how will we deal with the intermittency? Like, do we implement more gas into the system to regulate and compensate the imbalances, or will there be storage in one way or the other involved? Is there already a discussion happening on government level or within the analysts that surround the government and advise? Do you know, maybe, John, about this?
No, I mean, you know, the administration, again, is 3 weeks in, and there's still a number of key posts that have not been named. You know, I'm always much more of a all above board type of guy. I think that that gives the diversification that you need. I would go back and, you know, for the half glass full approach. Your question, you were asking about, you know, back in 2014, and I just went back and I took a look at the scenarios that were put out by the government when Law 1715 was put out for 2014. And in the optimistic scenario, solar was only expected to reach 239 megawatts by 2030. So on that basis, this is absolutely a grand slam if we end up anywhere near what the polling suggested out of the auction in January.
Are you claiming that the PV industry is delusional or just very optimistic?
No. Again, I think that the potential is fantastic, and it's just a matter of can we solve a lot of the, you know, much more kind of detailed questions that, you know, Mark discussed, that I kind of covered in a macro basis, to really attract the world-class kind of scale that you have there. This is a trend that's moving. You know, the discussion of batteries, storage is going to be fundamental, and it's just, I think we're still kind of taking a little bit of baby steps here. That may not be bad as long as the ultimate vision is on track. The question is where the administration's kind of mindset is, and that, I think, is still to be determined.
And then one question that also came in is, when do you expect then that we start hitting that exponential curve? With little installed at the moment, hitting the exponential curve early on is not that hard, but do you actually have an idea, like within a year we'll be speaking about a whole different market, first auction taking place, DG developed? Is that your expectation on it, John?
I mean, my crystal ball here, let me polish it a little bit.
Rub it off.
Exactly. No, I mean, I do think that as soon as you get some industrial scale activity, and if it's done right, it's going to be very compelling, and it's going to be very difficult to kind of move back from. So this administration, like I said, is definitely understands that it needs to diversify, that it can't continue to kind of double down on the traditional areas. There are still advocates out there, clearly, of more hydro, et cetera. You know, there's been talk about coal. there's still a lot more debate and discussion that needs to be had. My only point is that I think if we get some movement here over the next couple of years, it'll be too compelling not to, and to not make it a major component of the energy mix.
True. Mark, do you have any estimation on the potential size for solar DG that we're looking at for Colombia? Is there like a rough estimate out there?
Well, there's no real estimate out there, and I mean, as I mentioned, 4 years ago, at Solarplaza 2014, well, I've already been wrong at that stage, where I was mentioning that we should have by 2015, 2016, we should have 200 megawatts of solar installed. I've been completely wrong with that so far. But I would certainly say, I mean, from what I've heard, from what I hear around the market, there should be around 100 megawatts around. What does that mean? That could be projects that can be built in the next 12 months from now. There can be projects that can be built in the next 24 months, or cannot be built. That's the decision, that's the call that every one of the industrials need to take. From what I would say, what we need to do to really ramp up to exponential values and not keep on building 50 kilowatt systems is we need to make things much easier on the bureaucracy level, because a lot of people, myself included, we are annoyed by any kind of rare utility requirements. Just by putting some solar panels on a house for 5-6 kilowatts, you need to fill up basically 150 pages to fill them out and wait for an inspector and wait until he gives the final approval, and maybe by then you could sell them the energy. That doesn't make sense. We need to get very clear, very easy proceedings. We need a government that's putting, let's say, the importance on that and saying, okay, we need to move forward much quicker than we do. Utilities just shut up, because that's the main problem. That's really the main problem. That's why, as I showed, who's really leading the market? Well, the utilities at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's a lot of vested interest to compete with. But yeah, you mentioned now briefly like the processes that are very cumbersome or tiresome. Let's put it like that. Do you then also, to extrapolate this to the auction scheme, do you expect a delay in the auction scheme? Like it's the first one happening, not that much time to prepare it, or are we that set for that January 2019 Hosanna moment?
Well, you know, dates in Colombia are always flexible. This is the first thing I learned almost 5 years ago when I stepped into the country. So I would not think that this is going to happen in January or February next year. We had a law called Law 1715, which is still active and still working, for all the benefits of the solar industry that came out of the place in 2014. It just took us 4 years to get the CREC 030 to finally get the remuneration scheme for the excess energy for net billing. So I mean, I don't expect it's going to take us 4 years to get the real auction scheme in place and to get, let's say, the bits and bytes that are missing. But I would still say it will take some substantial time.
Yeah,
I have John, please.
No, I was just going to actually kind of answer it a different way. Let's hope there's delays. If there's delays, it's going to suggest that there's a lot more discussion about some of the issues that are going to be fundamental for some of the international development that is interested in the market. So, yeah.
Now I know for sure, John, that you're the glass is half full guy. I have one final question. Yeah,
he's right. Actually, he's right, John. I mean, for example, one of the major questions that we always get about the auction is, well, what's going to be the bond? What's going to be the warranty that the government is asking for? And the answer is, well, we don't know yet. And that's going to be one of the first questions to ask.
Yeah, is there still room to influence this process?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, then let's use that to the best of our abilities. I have one final question. First, John, maybe to you, and then I will ask the same question. Will go to Mark. Would we be speaking about solar energy in this shape, form, opportunity without the peace deal in Colombia?
Interesting question. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that renewables, it's a global trend, right? I mean, the peace process is one that has taken up a lot of time and attention during the past administration. The implications are significant in terms of everything from credit grade rating to access to capital to kind of security issues in the country. So, I mean, one of the things we didn't really kind of get into a discussion of is what are called the ZNIs, which is the non-interconnected grid in Colombia. Renewables have a fantastic potential in a lot of these areas where the grids just simply don't extend into Colombia. Anybody that's spent any kind of time in the country understands understands that. But there's obviously there's vested interests there as well. But the potential is high. The question is how do you finance it? How do you deal with security, et cetera? Mm-hmm. And so, again, I really boiled this down to a lot of education and then a lot of just vision. What we need right now is we need vision. And the vision is going to come through some education and just interaction with more and more folks and understanding of how other markets have dealt with similar type of issues.
Yeah, true. Mark, maybe one quick response to round it up.
Yeah, I would. But first of all, I agree with John. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the peace process is a macro process for the country, which is absolutely important. I don't think renewables could have developed much quicker without the peace process. Maybe, but it's a pure speculation. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I mean, things are as they are. Well, we see a market that's really ramping up. We see an auction that's coming. So we all are very happy, especially what John mentioned in this last sentence. We're all very happy to explore possibilities in the non-interconnected zones, yep, where you have diesel prices of 35 to 40 US cents per kilowatt hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's more that almost goes nears low-hanging fruit in terms of PV. Displacing diesel. That will be and the need is high is there for clean, affordable energy, of course. Gentlemen, I would like to thank the both of you for presenting today, for speaking today. All the listeners, the audience, thank you for joining us. As said, 19th till 21st of November, we will be in Colombia for the El Futuro Solar Colombia conference. I hope to see most of you there. It will be excellent to get you connected and kickstart the Colombian PV market in full glory. In the meantime, we do have a conference coming up near Colombia, Mexico, and Central America for the Solar Asset Management Conference, beginning of October. The end of October, we have Solar Asset Management Europe. These conferences go about operational phase of solar plants. Of course, every emerging market at a certain point, you reach this critical mass where solar is undisputable, and then you get into new topics on the O&M side. How do you guarantee the output of your plants, etc.? These are all topics discussed in these conferences. Once again, thank you all for listening in, for your attention, and for your time. Do hope to meet soon.